Okay, so recently I had sent in a letter asking a very specific question about what steps can be taken by this office or by myself and others to show the congressman or this office reason for creating legislation to answer some specific problems. Instead of receiving an intelligent reply back, and I'm sure this is probably just a mistake, I received a generic reply that makes reference to the George Floyd Act, HB with 1280. I have the email that I got it from. Let's see if you can pull it up and resubmit this for me, and then put a note on it and say this person has received the generic reply already. Can we give them an honest one?
May I ask who's calling? I'm sorry.
Yes, Nicholas, Nicholas, Woodall, Woodall.
Okay, I can make a note of that. And then, Nicholas, what was your original message about?
Sorry, say that again?
What was your original message about?
The original message was to ask what steps could be taken to create legislation that would require states to create law enforcement education materials defining the rights and responsibilities that a citizen has when interactions with law enforcement occur, as well as interactions with other persons. It was also about creating criminal law translations, requiring that states and federal jurisdictions have translations of at least criminal laws so that the persons who are responsible for knowing those laws and following them, who don't speak English, will have that information available to them. There was also a couple other issues, such as adding that information to the naturalization tests, and so on and so forth, ma'am. Have you found it yet?
Sorry, I'm just making a new note of that. Let's see.
Say that again?
I was just, making a note of that. Let's see. Okay, so, let's see.
Listen, it's a complex letter. It's involved. It requires responses. And so it's going to require a resubmittal. Let's see if you can pull up the letter. That way you won't have to rewrite, the subjects or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it is a longer message.
Yeah, it's a 3 to 5 minute read.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, so I will make a note of that, and I will pass that on.
Right. You're going to specifically make a note that, who is this? MI or M106IMA at mail.house.gov, whoever's in charge of that email. Well, they're obviously, y'all are either overworked and you need to make an adjustment, send out honest letters and say this can't be replied to at the time, or you need to address the staffer and figure out if they're not able to do their job.
So that is actually me. So, yeah, just...
So, can I ask you why you sent me a letter about the George Floyd Act, which doesn't address any of these issues? I've read it. I've read it more than once. And in some, it addresses racial issues, but it does not address the issues that I'm asking to be addressed, which is specific legislation for, while these may be minority issues, they're not colored people issues, they're not black people issues. And I don't know if you looked at, nationwide who was marching. It wasn't just black people. These are poor people who this is affecting, ma'am. And, Black Lives Matter isn't addressing these issues. Nobody is. And that's the reason why I wrote this office, was to determine what steps you require in order to begin, in order to either see reason or see reason not to create legislation. But So I've got to ask, why would you send me a letter about the George Floyd Act when I asked specifically what steps could be taken to create legislation around specific issues that are addressed in the George Floyd Act?
Right. So the response I sent you was not specifically about the George Floyd Act. It was about a number of acts regarding police reform, which is generally what the theme of your message was. And so I thought best, hey, writing in about the same issue. But, in terms of actually getting legislation started, I myself am not super familiar with that. But what first comes to mind would be organizing at a local level, maybe even contacting your state level representative and, getting something going within the state of Michigan.
Right, that's understood. However, as some of us are criminals, felons and whatnot, prison reformees, parolees, we're not eligible for acting or taking part in party politics. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you can't register to vote, you can't be a member of the party, right?
Right, but even organizing, and joining organizations or, even starting petitions, for reforms like these, there is a lot more to it than, just voting or
No, and I do understand. However, these issues don't just affect our state.
Right, but that's a good place to get started.
And so the behavior that's been seen recently, these marches, they're not becoming more peaceful, right? The situation isn't becoming calmer. It's, it's one business gets trashed, and, in another state, it's 5 business gets trashed. And in another state, people walk down the street smashing windows. So this is national. And while steps are being taken to reach out to statewide legislators, this is a national issue. And this is an issue of, it shouldn't be just this state. It should be, or our state. It should be every state. It should be in Texas. It should be in Michigan. It should be in Illinois. It should be in New York and California. Understanding that a person should be entitled to as a human, not just as civil rights, but as a human, should have the right to know what their rights and responsibilities are when interactions occur, is something that, well, you can't govern fairly without explaining or at least introducing the rules. And there is no introduction, man. There is no explanation. And so when these miscommunications occur, not only does it cost the community time, it would cost taxpayers money as well, because they have to pay out to a law enforcer who is angry because they have to chase a suspect, or a suspect wasn't behaving properly because they weren't informed. And you know what? If these were bad people, or if in situations where these are bad people and they had been informed, it wouldn't be news, because it would be someone who was aware they were breaking the law. And in situations where they weren't bad people and they were murdered, or police use excessive force, well, then that's these situations where, George Floyd addressed those issues. Some of the information may touch on that, increased statistics and so on and so forth, body camera footage requirements and so on and so forth. But again, it does not address the foundational issue of a person has the right to be aware of what their responsibilities and rights are as they, are to the laws, and requiring that states have that available. And so that's why a U.S. representative is being contacted. That's why this office is being contacted. Can you do me a favor? Are you the person in charge of judiciary matters?
Nope.
Okay. Let me ask you, can you send this over to that person? I think it would be best fit for them. It's not really an educational issue, because it doesn't pertain to funding for education or specific situations of curriculum. it's focused more on requirements of judiciary matters and how it would relate to constitutional rights.
I will see what I can do about getting you in contact with someone about that. But, like I said, in terms of getting some kind of legislation started, definitely petitions, getting groups, finding people with that common interest, that is a great place to
start.
That's
been done. That's been done. The determination is we want to know that Mr. Upton will take up this cause and say, specifically, I need 100,000 citizens, or I need 100,000 citizens from Michigan to sign a petition in order for me to start legislation, or I need you to show me a this or that, an ideological reason, such as best way to govern fairly, or the only way to govern fairly, is to introduce and educate in some measure the rights and responsibilities a citizen has when interactions with law enforcement occur, or specifically their rights and responsibilities as law enforcement is, as laws are impressed upon them. Understanding measures of punishment, that's gonna alleviate a lot of frustrations in the poor community. People being aware of what they're in for if they break the law might be a good deterrent. Without a doubt, every criminal I've ever talked to tells me I wouldn't have done what I did to the level that I did if I had known that I was going to sit in here for this long, if I was going to be stuck in here for this long. So, with that said, ma'am, can I ask you, are you going to be able to disposition this over?
Yeah, like I said, I'll make a note of it and I'll pass it along.
Okay, and I mean, I've got to ask, so is there a specific reason why you didn't answer and you gave, I mean, because that's a generic reply, right? That's a pre-written letter, correct?
So, sir, you wrote in about something relating to police reform, so I sent you a response related to police reform, and yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I hear what you're saying, and you're not breaking the chain of command like I would expect you to break the chain of command. So when someone writes you about police reform, you read it and you respond to the question, if there is one. The specific issues or the specific information that you sent to me doesn't answer any of those questions. The start out of the letter says what steps can be taken, and while steps are in the progress to form limited liability corporations or a nonprofit, so on and so forth. Again, this is specifically looking to determine what steps can be taken by this office, and so I do appreciate it, ma'am. I'm worried that you may be overworked, or that there may be an issue. Listen, coming from prison, I can tell you the food gets poisoned, people stab you with needles, they got fentanyl and other kinds of weird shit, and that's every day. So I imagine that working for the United States government is probably pretty the same. And Washington, D.C. isn't a good city, right? It's a slum, right? Hello?
I'm still here.
Listen, ma'am, all I'm saying is go ahead and, take your time, send that over there, and most importantly, be safe and take care of yourself so that you're able to do the job that we need you to do, so that y'all can get stuff like tax done, and you don't spend 15 minutes on the phone over an issue that, affects 1% of the population directly.
I told you I would go ahead and take a note of this and pass it along, but thank you for calling.
Thank you, ma'am. Y'all be safe.
All right, bye.